This will get faster. Okay, this is the original survey from 1870. Those of you, especially some of our folks with real estate, know exactly what you're looking at there with the ranges and townships and all that kind of stuff. And can everybody see that, or should I make that larger or brighter or anything? Okay, this, I'll use my little, well, I'll use this, that way I'll screw anything up. Okay, this is just to orient you. This is Juanita Bay, right here. Okay, this one of the nice things about the West that I really didn't realize until I went to the East is that we have a grid system. By the time the settlers were coming out here, they understood that, you know, hey, this is this wide open land, and what we can end up doing is just put an isological grid over everything for our land measurements. Whereas you go into the East Coast, they use a system that's called meets and bounds. So you can see these old deeds and things from the 18th century. Where it's, you know, you go to the big rock at the corner of the creek by the oak tree and take a left and go hook up around Crandall Lane and go around the minister's backyard. And you'll find, I mean, these are property line descriptions. But here, we've got it down. Now, interestingly, if you recognize some of these lines, well, what are they? They're many of the roadways that we end up using now. So you've got Northeast 116 is pretty much on this line right here, 124th, 132nd. So it starts to make it really easy for you to orient yourself. Now, as you can see in 1870, there's not much going on here, and you've got one guy. Right over here, Juanita Bay, there's his house. We know exactly where it was, and they wrote his name there because it was just one guy. Hubbard, Martin Hubbard. And we also know that the original name of Juanita was Hubbard's Landing. Doesn't take a genius to figure that out. That's where Hubbard lived and landed his boat, and hence Hubbard's Landing. And we also know from some of what we already have that this was a common kind of stepping off point to head up to the wooden place in what we now refer to as Woodenville. Well, sometimes these people would portage, they would carry canoes and things all the way down. They didn't need help clubs. They just, you know, hoof this thing on down and launch at the beach to go over to Seattle. It was kind of a major deal. But as you can see, in 1870, there's nothing happening here except poor old Martin Hubbard. I say poor old Martin Hubbard because he ended up dying. He drowned off the point here a number of years later. He's interesting. He's buried in the cemetery. So, 1870, not much going on, and let's move up to 10 years later, and this is something I learned from El Paolita. Let's go to the census and see in 1880 what we have for this enumeration district. Now, something that's kind of interesting here that you'll notice right off the bat. Can anybody see those names, or should I blow that up a little more?
Blow it up. Can't really see anything.
Is that getting more into the range? Okay. Okay, so yeah, so this is a great place to start research, and that's one of the reasons I was so excited she wrote that article, because this really keeps everybody honest. This tells you what was going on there for the most part, I think, and it also gives you an idea of where people were laid out in relation to each other, because the enumerator would walk around so you know who were neighbors. I mean, in some cases where it's an actual city, they'll have the house numbers, like the city of Kirkland stuff at different times. You know what house they were in. The street name may have changed, but you can get a feel for it. So it's not as though the people are in there random. So right off the bat, in trying to research somebody or trying to research a family, you know, you can look at one of these old census sheets and start going through these names, and we have ourselves kind of, you know, oriented there, because there we've got Martin Hubbard. There was one other very helpful resource I should mention. As many of you are familiar with the Ruth Nelson map that was drawn in the 70s. That was a lady who was then quite senior, who dictated this map from her recollections, and she worked with the Kroll map, and so we knew from that, you know, a lot of these names, a lot of these people, and some of these families are still well remembered. You know, the Nyblock family, and maybe, of course, the Borges, many of the others. But to get a picture of things in 1870, let's look where we are here. We're in the Juanita Enumeration District. But you start moving down this thing, and you'll see, well, wait a second, there's the Langdons, there's the Dunlaps. You keep working your way down. Let's go down towards the talking with the sheep. And wait a second, we go from the Juanita families right up about here, what we think of as Juanita families, like the Dunlaps and the Langdons and things. And wait, there's the DeMotts right there. Well, we know the DeMott homestead. Well, first of all, Mr. Marsh had that bag 10 years ago that said, the burlap bag that said DeMott stock, that was a freight steamer bag, which is one of the best rallies I think I've seen in the last 15 years. There we're jumping to what is now the downtown Moss Bay area. Then we're to the Edwin Church and then Sam French. So pretty much between the French place on the water in Houghton and Juanita, you just have a couple of people. And this is 1880. But who we're finding there is these names like Forbes, Langdon, Dunlap, here at Evans, DeMott, French, J. O'Connor, who was associated with steamboats, and you go a little bit farther down. Of course, we get the interesting things too, like what they did for a living, their relations, their race. Politically incorrect as they were in 1880, this person was a half-breed. So, times change. Maybe think about things change.
Matt, can you scan all the way up to the top?
Yeah.
It also says free. Oh no, it doesn't say free. The
That's
ones
with,
no, the ones between, yeah.
with
the
color?
ones that say 1860 and before it'll say the free census.
Free color?
No, it says the free census because other people have their own census.
Yeah, you have to look at history sometimes with another one can be shocking. It's just life. It's the way it is. But anyway, so what I did, what we're doing is we're looking at the Langdon family a little bit there. We're saying, okay, we know where they were, we know where they live, what we know about them. There's our old friend Dora Forbes and his wife Eliza and the sons. And then here's some of the Langdons here. And you'll find actually there's several of them around. This is him and his sons and Harry. And you find out where they were from, where they were born. They're from Wisconsin, New York. I actually went back a fair ways. And interestingly, Harry they kept referring to him as an adopted son. And back in the 19th century, that may have been, that they were friends with the parents, and the parents died, used to die a lot, some things. And, so we know that he listed himself as a farmer, and the wife is engaged in keeping housekeeping. So, kind of moving along, I wasn't able to unearth any photographs of Roland Langdon or his wife. I do have some photographs of his son Harry, because Harry famously, he opened a store. And I pirated this from the East Side Heritage Collections. At the foot of 116th and 100th, where there's a gas station now. It's not a mobile anymore, but it's Union 76. It used to be the mobile across from Market Circle, or Coney Square. And this is where his little store was. This little false front grocery store down there, kind of general goods store. And he also, this is a neat one. I've seen this one before, but I never actually got my hand on a copy of it. He did delivery. You could have him deliver your groceries for the Juanita Grocery. And in the background, that is the Roland Langdon house. Roland Langdon and his family, when they first lived there in 1877, they had a log structure, and then they built this frame home in 1884. Now that home is still standing. We'll look at some other pictures of that as time goes on. A lot of people don't realize that house is as old as it is, because it was remodeled in the 30s. But this is let me say one more. This is a Marilee question too, I think. She might know this. I think that this is a photo of Harry French. I know that he built the red brick house that is there. I mean, we have that from records. But I've got a picture of him that I put in the newsletter with Mrs. McCullough when she was very little. And the problem is I couldn't tell whether it was him or Mr. Carlson. Do you know if that's him?
It's not a Johnson for sure.
She said there was a Mr. Carlson that lived in that house for many years. His wife was in a wheelchair. Remember her and him? And she couldn't remember, but from the age, I thought Harry French was still alive and living there, because that's got to be early World War II. wife, whose name was Minnie Langdon, and she remarried after she became a widow, and her last name was Sabo. And Mrs. McAuliffe referred to her as Aunt Minnie. And she lived down off of, what is that street down there? Down by, you know, the fire station used to be. It goes back where the apartments were around the ones. I forgot.
I don't think that's it.
Okay, this is,
Yeah, I don't think it's.
yeah, we're not sure, but we do, okay, yeah, that's what I'm asking. Because it's hard to tell at that age, because again, there was this Mr. Carlson that lived there. But this house we do know was built 1904, 1905, and still, if everybody is not familiar, this is a shot of it today. I also ran in the newsletter just so you know what I'm talking about. It still really looks, like I say, about the same. This is a decent footage for my son, my little son. There it is.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that house. And you can see from the comparison, it hasn't really changed all that much. The landscaping
Was
has.
built sturdily.
So what ended up happening is he settled there, Langdon settled there, and he had 160 acres originally. He proved up his land in 1889, July 19th, 1889. Now that meant you had to live on the land for a particular length of time, and then you could either get the land in some cases for free. Everybody thinks they always got it for free. Actually, there were different levels of qualification whereby they could pay a certain amount of money for the acreage, and there were different conditions, and there were different types of land patents depending on what they had. But he originally got 160 acres, and I'm not going to go back to the map, but he had the property that we currently associate with the McCullough Park. And then he had the property which was just east of that, which I don't know if people still call that Royal Pines development, but you know, over that direction toward about 119th. And then his went all the way back up to 124th. Okay, so up in your area there, and your side was all still owned by him. And he ended up selling the land. Approximately half of it went to the Osborne family, and the other half of it in the back went to a family named Voris, a minister named Voris. And that's another story. The whole Voris Myers Field thing is another story. But the property went to the Osbergs, and they were newlyweds. She was Siish, and he was from Kansas. Now this shot is one I had in the newsletter of her and little baby Alice, little daughter Alice. And what we're doing here is we're facing north, kind of looking at the area not too differently than the way that they found it when they came in. I was rather intrigued by this. This is a log structure off to the right. You can see that. And so and it's got a window in it. It's got a city-made, window there, which tells me that, you can see what they were doing for their livestock was something a lot cruder like that. So I wondered, was that possibly, his original cabin that had been there prior to building the house? I don't know. But we do know about where this is now on the property, kind of where this area is. And if you look over here, this side, by the cow, you see this stand of trees right up here. Well, by 1900, most of this area had been pretty well logged off. And so to have this kind of timber there still standing just meant that nobody could come up there and log that, because the guys had been there since 1877, didn't want to for whatever reason. He obviously cleared out a whole bunch already. And that would seem to bear out the claim that I've heard most of my life, that there's old growth timber up there, because I think that in this shot, where once again I had to put my son in, I think this is approximately the same standard trees if you look at the other, kind of the way they're in the pictures there. So I thought that would be something the city might be interested in. So they live there, and of course this barn is a beautiful barn, if everybody knows. It's kind of tucked away back behind there. And the Osbornes actually built that. That was not built by the Langdons. And thankfully the McCulloughs kept it up, because Mr. McCullough had a passion for collecting old things, so he liked to pile them up in the garage. Mr. Osborne, unfortunately, he died rather young in 1910. He had cancer. and he had big cancer growth on his neck, and he was a well-liked guy, and he left his wife a widow with 2 little girls, Alice and Urania. And, you know, back in those days, that was a pretty serious matter. So she went to work for the school district as a custodian. I should mention that their house, their property, adjoined what you might refer to as the second Juanita schoolhouse. The first having been located, according to Ruth Nelson, on the Dunlap property. The second, at about 119th, where all that new enclave development is, just kind of west of that, in between Maplewood Lane, they still call that. That's kind of up where that school was. We have a great picture down in the archives. You know which one I'm thinking of the kids standing in front of that, the Leslie Forbes is standing there barefoot. And the teacher there was a young man named Mr. Shannon, and he became an engineer. That's the interior of the school. We had this shot too at one time. He's sitting there, and that's the inside of that particular school building, and he became an engineer, and Lake Shannon, according to Ruth Nelson, was named for him. So that was kind of what was around there. I'll also show you this real fast. Down the street from them was the Ford original house that burned down too. And the one that's there now replaced it, the one down by Juanita Beach. But that was, you know, one of their nearest neighbors was in there. So she went to work there and went to work at the school. And, you know, this was in the days, you know, there wasn't a lot of, you know, options for a person like that in a situation like that. So she also used to have baseball games and sell chicken dinners to people. And this is a later period. This is the 30s, 1930s or so. They look like they're having a great time.
Looks like they were kind of dressed up. I mean, not for fun or anything.
And that was a big deal to her. She loaned us her diaries, many of which from that era. And she talks about with great disappointment if it was a rainy day on a Saturday and they weren't able to have a ball game, and you know she only sold a certain amount of chicken dinners, and that was really serious stuff. And she writes in there about being hungry, you know. So it's kind of interesting. You know, when we think about a lot of that. So anyway, she raised her girls, or she raised her 2 daughters, and incidentally, Urania was named after the steamboat. Yeah. As they grew up, Alice graduated in 1924. Oh wait, that's unlike. Oops, that's wrong. I'm in the wrong area here. I need Alice. I got the wrong. Oh wait a second. Here's another. Here's it before Mr. Osborne died. I got these out of order. I love this shot. This is this. Unfortunately, they put stickers on a lot of the old photos. These labels like that. But this is facing up 116th. This is roughly at the bottom of the hill, and you know you can see it wasn't much more of a road than a log skid. You can tell this is Osborne here, and I'm not sure who all the rest of the people are. But that's definitely facing up Langdon Road, as it's called then.
Says last year on that.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what that was, who they were.
Which one?
Who's this on the right? Who's that?
That's me.
Uh-huh.
And next is Marilyn Johnville, and Joanne's on the left.
I got a little out of order, but I had it.
Years ago.
Yeah.
Very cute.
This is Alice inside of the high school. Up here.
That's one that was a baby in the other picture?
Yeah, that's her. We had a lot of shots I was able to do.
Was she a teacher or was she a student?
She at this time was a student, and this was taken inside prior to her graduating in 1924. There was a lot of photos in one of the albums, these high school photos they could have been now, or my year of kids climbing around and swimming around on the steamboat and all these other kinds of things. It's pretty neat. And then this is her again. This is her at graduation with one of the Forbes. Do you know? Okay, that's Alice and that's her mom, and this is one of the Forbes girls. Do you know which one?
can find out.
It was kind of smudged. It wasn't Doris, because I know her.
No,
but
she's
I think it's one
younger.
of the other cousins.
It was the older girl. Doris, 60 years younger than his two sisters,
Yeah.
older sisters.
This was their graduation. And then she got married to Art Johnson, and his family were early settlers out in the Totem Lake area. And, we could do a whole thing on them, too, if we wanted to. And I know that Christina Bergman did a lot related to that when she was doing her Mickelson research out there. But they got married in the 30s, and they like to, there's a lot of pictures, of, like all of us from this area, a lot of family pictures with dead fish and dead birds. And she worked, I was kind of too bad Alan's in here, I thought he'd get a kick out of this. Just before she got married, she worked as a teacher in Bellevue. And she was a teacher at Fan Lake Elementary in the 20s. And so, see the Japanese kids and, the mix there. She used to drive from Juanita to the Fan Lake area, which was, on roads that are anything like we have now. So she got married, and they ended up living in the Langdon House. And I just want to spend a minute on that, because we're probably running a little on time. This is the oldest shot I could find of the house, which just blew me away. Because the porch, the whole entry was from the front, the chimneys, everything else. I looked at that and I thought, wow, what a big difference that was. And that's when I put on the cover. And you saw little Alice there, her dog, on the stoop. But then the poorhouse remodeled. And this was around 1932. They tore off the porch and started chopping things up and changing them around until you end up with the configuration that roughly that it has today, where they've taken the change the whole look to it. Like I said, next time I do this, I'll get this a little in order and a little less smooth. Oh, there it is. Okay, sorry. So that's how it is today. But all that siding and the way the front ends and everything else is completely different. They blocked off the chimneys, but you can still sort of see the old house there, and when it would need if it still looks like that. Just real fast here to hit. One of the things Bob sent out an email a while back talking about the post-World War II era, and that kind of got me thinking because I'm used to looking more at the really, really old stuff. But here's another one of the house. So we're going to get into the more post-war era. There's that's Jerry and Joanne McAuliffe with his pride and joy car in front of the house in the 50s. And having a good time. And he wanted me to prove that to everyone that he did graduate from high school. And so I promised him I would put that up there, and those rumors were not true. And they were.
Mr. Johnson was the superintendent then.
And so he's got that expression even back then, if you know him.
Frank and I and John and Jerry all graduated in 1954, so, yeah.
Well, Jerry wasn't the best scholar, though that's why you were joking about that, but Joanne was.
Yes, she was, yes.
This one too, I like. This one is, he lived down on the lot right down here. His family was right down here. And he had that crisscross when he was in high school. So,
He used to want to see from his house to my house, and that was his turnaround to go back home.
yeah, I mean, can you imagine having that in high school? That shape machine. And then this one I had to throw in too. This is keeping in mind with Bob's thoughts since World War II. That is Timmy McAuliffe on the left, who is their youngest son, getting on the bus with Matt McCauley on the right, 1869.
That's fun.
just kind of a then and now. I have another shot of that same corner nowadays. My little son up there, but we were roughly up there in the corner. So actually, that little area hasn't changed all that much. But anyway, so it's kind of getting to the time point here. But I again just kind of wanted to give you the overview of what we've been able to learn that's going on up there and kind of what they used to do. I hope to still acquire some more materials and everything and be able to put a lot of this stuff back together. Does anybody have any questions?
Well, there's a lot we haven't seen when we get to see the rest.
I just didn't want to keep people that were. Some of these are just wonderful. Like that's Joanna Paul for the grandmother. Every year they had the pictures under this tree, and you can watch her grow up. And that's looking into the backyard area there.
Lovely.
There's a couple like that. This was. I'm jumping around in time because I was just looking at this, but this was not long after they come over from Sweden. Now, one of the interesting things about Anna Osborne, I mean, if we ever were to do any kind of a women of early Kirkland kind of deal, she was interested. I mean, she was like Eliza Forrest. These pioneer women didn't screw around. She went as a single woman up to Alaska in the gold rush. And did her thing up there with a bunch of Swedes, and then came down and married Julie Osborne. But she was up in Alaska involved with, doing stuff. And she didn't even barely speak the language, and getting out and making things happen. So it's kind of, I think that's also why he was able to,
What is the Larson in parentheses there?
that was her maiden name.
Married name?
Yeah, maiden name.
Oh,
Larson.
okay, she married
Yeah.
Osborne.
Right. And you know what's funny too in these diaries is when she starts getting into anything that's risque or gossipy, she changes from English to Swedish. So if you read Swedish, you might have to go back.
Yes, for understanding.
Yeah, there's some stuff in there that's kind of funny. And then it just starts to get good and she breaks off. This is kind of just a little bit of what's up there now. Their house was built about 1967. It's now owned by the city.
Do you know who Urania's husband was? Carl somebody?
I have that in my notes.
Okay.
I have that in my notes. They were all pretty well interconnected around here too.
Carl, I think it was Carl, and I'm not sure what his last name was. I've been trying to.
Oh, I can find out easily. I have that in my notes at home.
They had a daughter, Shirley.
Yeah, I have all. I got all that from her.
Okay.
These trees, incidentally, they're still there, were planted by Harry French.
Oh, really?
Those fruit trees. It's one of the reasons they're so old. This was this. Do you remember him, really? This Mr. Carlson?
No, I don't.
He lived there, and then
We got another picture.
this was his wife. You do?
That definitely looks like.
Right, Carlson, yeah, I think we got another picture.
That looks like the same as that other picture.
That
Yeah.
was his wife.
Oh, no, I don't remember them.
Who looks a lot like her daughter, Molly.
She
She's
does.
little.
Yeah. I was that age when they were there, so I don't have a memory of.
Wheelchairs.
Carlson. Oh, they pop into my brain.
What's up with the car that?
This, oh yeah, no, I didn't show, yeah, this was Mr. McCall's pride and joy. He's got it for Washington.
That's a 56.
That's a good one, that's a good angle, actually. You see the other side of the road over there, that's facing west. You see the fruit trees and the house that used to be there.
The Packard behind it over there?
Parked along the road.
Yeah.
This well that's there keeps showing up too, the covered well that's still up there. I've seen pictures of that. Is that pretty much all of them?
This is the first.
This one,
Yeah.
with the dead birds? Oh, and one of these was kind of interesting too, but I didn't miss because I was trying to. So, this was their Wide Awake Club in 1918. And that's a house with a, I didn't see a lot of that in childhood. They didn't seem to have a lot of fun photography going on until she was in high school, but that may have been because they were kind of hard times. Where the Wide Awake Club was.
What
Oh,
is it?
They were calling it the Wide Awake Club. And then I should add that the school they went to, that Alice Osborne went to, and that Mrs. Osborne worked at, was actually the third Juanita school. It was down where Juanita 1951 elementary school is now. And we have a nice picture of that school that was taken by Bryce Kinsey.
Around that time, Woodland Park bought an elephant called Wide Awake. And the kids in all the schools chipped in pennies to buy that elephant.
There's stories of it in the annals. So just in fact,
That's great. Well, that makes sense. That's a whole lot.
So would you repeat what you just learned, yeah?
That the Wide Awake Club is referring to an elephant that was purchased by the Woodland Park Zoo that sounds like they had kids donating money, they're saving up pennies.
Pennies.
And why was it called the Wide Awake?
That was the name of the
That
elephant.
was the name of the elephant.
The elephant was
So that's pretty much everything I think that I have in the can on these folks, and I still got to get with Dave, and we're going to try to get a lot of this stuff reproduced. But that gives you, you know, a little bit of a background on a piece of property in a new park, and it's, to me, it's just fantastic that it's able to stay intact for that period of time. I mean, it's whittled down now to, I don't know how many acres that is now, 25 or so, something like that from
Could
1960.
you
but
put
that's-
on the screen the picture on the top?
Which one?
Well, the one in the middle, you know, when you jump, the one, you jump around so much you can't see it.
Okay.
The one that looks like it has writing on it.
Okay.
Well, that was the census.
Oh, was that what it was?
What was the original acreage of the property?
160 acres, two
So it
sections.
was like a homestead then, homestead size.
Yeah.
Are there any Langdon descendants around that you know of?
I don't. Do you?
We've
They
got
have
Langdon
values.
in our Model A club, and one time he told me that he was a descendant of the people that had the store in Juanita. Maybe he's somebody you need to talk to.
What was his name?
Fred Langdon.
Fred Langdon.
Landon, he's spelling it Landon now. They left the G, he's leaving the G out. Lives in Renton.
Huh.
How old is he?
He's about 50.
Yeah, that'd be interesting because the Dunlaps and the Langdons, I mean, I just haven't known.
I'll give you his
Stayed around
address.
20
I
years,
have
yeah.
it at home. so
Talking to
I can
him.
email it to you.
Sure. And was it just the census you were asking about? The census, yeah.
Yeah.
And we had that too.
Oh, yeah, it's too hard to read.
There was a picture there showing some kids in front of the high school.
Oh, yeah, that was,
Put that on the screen again.
sure. I got
That would be right behind us here.
Yeah, you can see the terrace.
Union A's.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't have it correctly.
Oh, yeah.
So what is that?
That's, wait a second, that was a junior high? Is that the junior high when, because they haven't built that love yet.
That was the high school.
Union A.
That was the high school, the Union A high school. And then the one beyond that was the junior high.
Well, who's in the picture?
That's Gail Rockefeller's on the lower left front. And I'm trying to remember.
Oh, the girl on the top that's Lou Ann Myers?
Could be, could be.
By that time, wouldn't that be the junior high rather than the high school? The high school, was 49?
49.
Yeah, 49.
Yeah,
Was there a Dylan in there then?
Dylan, she was younger than this group.
Is that a teacher in the, off to the right side from the road?
I don't think so, they're all students now.
I like it because it clearly has a building there. You know, I don't know what it is.
and looking through the albums, you know, the annuals, when I was taking them out, there's a lot of shots of classes and groups taken out on that upper terrace, looking out down the front of the building and out over the lake.
That must be like in 50, 51, 52. age of
The fifties, well, the
because
hairstyles,
I came back in 50, I was gone for about 3 years. And then came back, and I wasn't here at this time.
just the hairstyles.
Yeah. And Gail, yeah, they're probably 15, 14, 15, do you think?
At least that.
Yeah, it could be 17.
No, they're not that old. I was here in junior.
Oh, you know them, okay.
Yeah. I know Gail.
And it must have been something special, they all have white dresses, or costumes, or, something on, sweater.
You sound asleep, so I'm opposite of the way.
Yeah.